Welcome to Racing Roots with Hamm, and my guest tonight is Tony Cable, a former NASCAR official, I suppose, right?
That's great.
Tony, how you doing tonight?
Oh, great.
Man, it's great to see you.
Good to be here.
And you look familiar, yes, sir. You look familiar to me, and I don't know if you've been over to Roush Yates Engines before. Have you ever been over there?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
No.
I was trying to place it. I guess, sometimes I see people that I haven't seen in 20 years, and I'm like, gosh, they look familiar. I didn't recognize Bob Tracy until actually after the show, and I saw pictures of him, and I was like, oh, I remember him because he had hair back then. And I mean, 20 years changes people a lot. So
Well, we all change through the years, that's for sure.
yeah, that's for sure, man. But it's good to see you. And how you been doing?
Oh, great. I did my last deal with NASCAR at Phoenix, and so I'm done with that. And so looking forward next year to just playing golf and doing what I want to do.
There you go. So no more NASCAR. So I can actually ask you the questions that I want to ask. Maybe within reason.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. There might be a statute of limitations still, or a what do you call it? A confidentiality clause or something like that.
Yeah,
I'm just picking at you.
I'm definitely no spokesman for NASCAR. I want to get that out of the way right off the bat. But,
Yeah, I know it's changed a lot.
What I say would be my own opinions, and some don't let the truth get in the way of a real story.
Let's just say you've probably seen a lot of change over the years, right, Tony?
Yes, it has. It's changed a lot, and of course that's a sign of the times that everything changes as time goes on. So as well as NASCAR.
So if you don't recognize that voice, that's Phil Cavalli over here. Got him to my left. I'll show you. I'll switch the camera over and let you see Phil. Looking mighty fine tonight. He's got a roll. Is that a Rolling Stones? I don't know. It's a big tongue sticking out. It looked like Rolling Stones.
No, my buddy owns the company that moves all the. He owns a roadie company. They move the Rolling Stones, so I've got a bunch of their swag. This is from the Big Bang Tour in 2005.
Oh, so they moved the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, the company's called Sound Moves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
At least they're Rolling Stones and not like Square Stones.
That's right.
All
That's
right.
right.
So anyway, what's up, everybody tuning in on our Facebook page here, DHammiam. And don't forget to hit that like and hit that subscribe if you like. If you don't like, hit the thumbs down, but hit it twice, please. Yeah. All right, so we got Dickie Dennis on here, and we were talking about him. He was the infamous fence climber in 2014 at Richmond, and you said you thought you might remember that, at least, or maybe you even saw it on TV or something. Mike Baer, what's up, Mike? Rachel Rodman down in Charlotte, and Steve Baker up in Virginia. He might have had a beer or two by now. And let's see. And Dickie says, I think Hamm stopped to get a beer. I got plenty of that in the refrigerator back here. We're in the WAME Randy Marion studio, and we actually have beer sponsors, but I don't drink beer anymore, so sorry about that. Scott Trevison, speaking of beer, we got the beer man on from Daytona. He said a rocket launch scrubbed. Does that mean they said forget it? I guess because of the wind, maybe. Yeah.
You got Suzette McGuire from South El Monte, California.
That's right, Suzette.
Yeah,
What's up,
Suzette.
Thanks for joining us here. And am I missing anybody else? Oh, there's a few comments on there. I saw Scott went to Volusia Speedway Park, and I saw the pictures of that. I'm thinking, next time I go down there, we're going to have to get over there and check that racetrack out. Well, we went and we did our Racing Roots or show, yeah. I think it was NASCAR Live Chat with Hamm and Beer Man then, and we did that right outside of Volusia Speedway. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was.
Got to meet the, Scott, what was his position? Was he the owner, manager, or something like that? What's up, Rachel Rodman and Dawn Clark here, and Dawn's in Statesville, Rachel's in Charlotte, and she volunteers with the NASCAR Hall of Fame a lot of times. So I actually got to go down there and do a presentation type thing. All right, so tell us about how let's just start from the very beginning of your, when you were growing up, and maybe you had a favorite driver or whatever, but whatever got you interested in getting into NASCAR.
Well, I've always been a fan of NASCAR back in the 60s, because a group of us would hang out at the local service station there in our little small community and listen to the races on TV, and always been a car guy, love fast cars and any type of racing. And
where was that?
That was in Marion, North Carolina.
Okay.
and we lived in a little community down there called Sugar Hill. And,
Sugar Hill.
Yeah. And but we had our own little drag strip down there, and about a mile long straight there. We had a quarter of a mile drop.
Oh, wow.
And we did drag racing and stuff there on the street, and never did get in trouble with the law too much, but we got scolded a few times.
Sure, yeah.
And,
So that got your interest in horsepower.
yeah. My first car was a 55 Oldsmobile, and it was a big old heavy car, but it had like a 324 cubic inch engine in it, and I'd wire those guys out with those 55 Chevys and 56 Fords, and that was a pretty cool car.
Right. So then, whenever you were around that stuff, so did you meet someone that worked in NASCAR or actually circle track stuff?
Well, actually, my first experience back in the '60s, I got married at an early age, like 19, and we moved to Newport News, Virginia, and I worked at a Chevrolet dealership up there, and our service department manager was actually I guess you'd call a freelance photographer. He'd go to the races and do the pictures and stuff. And since me being from North Carolina, and I'd always go with him on weekends, and he'd get to go in the garage. And I thought that was really good. I actually got to do a little deal on one of the pit crews there. Like, I forgot now, I think it was holding the stop sign or whatever it was.
Right.
But that was really my first experience with actually being involved in anything.
Yeah, that was my first job in NASCAR, was holding that pit sign. Yeah, or during pit stops, right? I mean, that was my first pit experience. So, well, you said you worked at Acres Trucking.
Yeah. When I turned 21, you couldn't drive a truck in those days till you were 21. I don't know, it may still be the same. I don't know, but when I turned 21, we moved back to North Carolina, and I went to truck driving school, and right out there I got a job with Acres in 1966.
Where was that?
In
Gastonia?
Yeah, well, actually the terminal was in Charlotte, and that old terminal is still there at Little Rock Road there, and it's a big parking lot now for the airport.
Okay.
And that was their terminal, but their home office was in Gastonia.
Oh, okay.
But
I know my grandfather worked there at Acres, but I don't know which one he worked. Well, I guess he would have worked there at Little Rock Road, I'm assuming.
Yeah, if he was, that's where all their office person, I guess probably their main office thing was in Gastonia. Okay. That's I think that's what was on the side of the truck there. It said, the Acres decal with, I think it said Gastonia.
Oh, okay.
Underneath there, but the big terminal there was in our Little Rock Road in Charlotte.
Okay.
And it was really a good company as a union company, and fortunately spent my entire career as truck driving in the Teamsters Union, and retired there at an early age, like 53, with 31 years experience. And so that's really what was a stepping stone to get into NASCAR.
Yeah.
As a truck driving company. As soon as I retired there from the Teamsters Union, like I said, I was at an early age, and stayed home, for a couple of months. Man, I was bored and didn't have any, because I'd been on the road pretty much all my life. And so I got on the internet and just filled out kind of a resume, for anybody looking for somebody to get in racing. And the guy that worked for J. Robinson Racing, he ran late model cars at the time. And so he called, wanted to know if I could, drive their truck. And we run races over in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida, around St. Augustine stuff. And matter of fact, Rodney Childers was a driver, and he was a heck of a driver too.
Oh, okay.
I think he probably had a better career as a crew chief than he would have.
I know he's done very well.
And that really got me, because we took a Bush car to Bristol, tried to qualify it, and I was going in to get my credentials there with for the race, and a friend of mine drove the registration trailer for NASCAR, and I stopped by to say hello to him, and he said, "We need somebody to help go to Fontana. Would you like to go?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So I helped him drive a truck to Fontana, and so since I had some background in racing, some, the first thing he did, he gave me a official shirt and said, "Okay, we're putting you to work." I said, "Okay, great."
Nice.
And so that was my first experience there was as a NASCAR official, and I was pretty impressed.
Yeah, that's a great story. What's up, Patrick Jinks? He says he was going to go iRacing, but it got delayed, so that worked out pretty good. He gets to stay with us. And Sissy Odell here in Statesville. Let's see, Rachel and who else? Linda Jinks. Yeah, what's up, Linda? Okay, so then you became you were driving a truck, and you were also a NASCAR official.
Yeah, and that first year I worked part-time. Well, actually, after the initial inspection hour that day, I went around and helped one of the other guys. We went around and put templates on the front of the car, and I was really inspired. And the first car I put templates on, it was the '97 when Jeff Hammond was crew chief.
Oh, okay,
and,
yes, the John Deere.
And Chad Little, I think, was the driver at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jeff, he was down putting taping the grill up on the car, and so I go up, and the official I was with there said this, he introduced me. So Jeff stood up from what he was doing and shook hands with me, and said, and I thought, wow, here's a champion crew chief calling me sir and shaking hands. I thought, what's this all about?
Yeah.
But,
or maybe he's trying to distract you from seeing what he was doing too.
Exactly. He knew how to butter up the officials.
That's right.
Well, they had their job to do, and we had ours to do the time I was with them.
That's for sure. And Jeff he went through, look at all the different teams that he worked on that won a lot of races. So, yeah, very impressive. Yeah. I had Mike Hill in here as well, and he worked with him.
Yeah.
And somebody else. But anyway. Yeah, so tell us about, this is something I've never, okay, so I was a NASCAR, I was a crew member and an engine builder, so I've been through that different type of stuff in the garage area. But what is a NASCAR official? What is the day like in the life of a NASCAR official?
Well, it starts pretty early, and as you know, we're all the officials are the first ones there and the last ones to leave. And first thing you do each morning is have an officials meeting, and we go through what's expected through the day and different racetracks. Different rules, like on road courses and stuff.
Tony, you're probably talking 30, 40 guys, right? I've seen it like in a big circle outside of the hauler, all meeting.
No, actually, even more than that. Probably it's probably over 60. I mean, especially when you had all three series running together. You had the truck officials there and the Xfinity officials as well, plus all the Cup guys.
And a lot of those guys doesn't come from all over the U.S. too. Some guys just weekend warriors, right?
Yeah. Oh, when I first went to work there, we actually had more part-time officials than we had full-time.
Sure.
And then when John Darby came on as series director, he wanted more full-time officials doing the same job each and every week, because when you had the part-time guys, you'd be doing something different every week.
Right.
And so he wanted this department to do the same thing, and he thought, we could do more efficient job.
Guys like Mike DeMoss, he lives way up in Maine. He was full-time, was he? Or because
I don't remember. No, I think he was part-time. Yeah. And like I say, we only had just a few full-time officials at that time. It's like in 99 or 2000. And excuse me.
That's a good question. So do they fly themselves in? I mean, I'm sure NASCAR pays their way from all over the place, and then they get a 1099 at the end of the year and write off everything, or
Yeah,
that kind of stuff? 'Cause-
they were like a private contractor. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, they would NASCAR would make all their flight arrangements and stuff. You know, the guys that we had guys that lived in Florida on the East Coast, and we had some guys in. I mean, it's all over.
So then you were saying about after your meeting, you guys would in the mornings.
Well, the first thing you do, you have what we call the initial inspection, and you had your templates and your chassis guys and fuel cell inspectors, you know, that did all the fuel cell inspections, and templates was a big thing back in those days, because there was so much more they could do with the body of the car then than they can now.
Yeah.
And so it was a pretty big deal. But I like I said, after we got everything centralized into different departments, I worked in the weight room there for several years, and then the last 3 years I worked in the chassis department, and I enjoyed working in the weight room or the scale room more than anything.
So what are some of the craziest things you saw as far as the cheating kind of stuff? Is that something you can talk about? I mean,
Well,
I'm sure.
we don't. You know, they prefer not to call it cheating. It's kind of getting a competitive advantage.
Yeah,
But,
sure.
On the scales there, we've seen stuff, you know, they'd have the water bottles, you know, full of lead, trying to get the weight up on the car, and then they take them out, and stuff hid under the seat and stuff, you know, that I guess you could probably call that cheating.
Yeah.
But it was all kind of, everybody took it, you know, with a grain of salt there until it got really bad, and then you'd have to get, you know, the upper management involved if
Yeah.
something happened. But the craziest thing I see is one car come through inspection. They had at Daytona and Talladega, the track bar had to be a certain height off the ground from clearance, you know, from the bottom to the floor. And this one car, he had a flat washer on top of the jack bolt, and they brought it in intentionally low and had to raise it up. Mm-hmm. And then when they turned that jack bolt there, it pushed the back glass up, and nobody see, you know, hey, you got to get that track bar up there. And one of the inspectors on that road seen a big old bubble in the glass, and that's a pretty big deal that at a restrictor plate rig, they knocked all the air off the spoiler.
That's smart.
And but they didn't get by with it.
Sure.
So it was a pretty big deal on that.
Were you traveling in, let's see, 99 maybe, I think it was, 98, maybe it was 90, actually it's probably more like 96, 97, whenever, I know one thing we did with Sabco, we took a bunch of carburetors. We had, NASCAR ended up with about 5 of our carburetors, let's just put it at that, because we had done some modifications to them. It wasn't illegal, but it was just bending the rules, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And basically changed the way the throttle plate's open, and then I redirected the one of the ports around under the base plate. So anyway, they didn't like it, and so they took the carburetors. And I didn't know if you remembered that. And another thing was when I was with the Busch Series, and I had done some stuff to some spacers, and they ended up taking the spacer because I basically had it hollered out all inside this 1-inch stick spacer.
Yeah.
And to help with reversions and things in the intake. Anyway, I didn't know if you remembered any of the Sabco stuff or the Bill Davis Racing stuff.
That was the format. I think, like I said,
I got you
99 or
before that.
2000 was my first years. But,
Yeah.
I heard some stories about
Yeah.
carburetors and stuff. And actually, a real good friend of mine passed away. Was official for years, and he was a carburetor guy, you know, I guess. And he's told me some stories about some stuff that.
We got a question here from Patrick Jenks. He wants to know were there a lot of loopholes in the rules back then, and how did they decide to penalize people compared to how they penalize them today?
Well, was he referring to pit road officiating or?
Well, no, I imagine probably tech inspection. You know, where
Tech inspection is pretty much a tape measure and templates. Back then, which now you have OSS and it's taken all that
so
out.
in
of
other
the
words,
official's
back
hands,
then,
so
somebody could get away with, a 64th of an inch.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, but if they, I think the question he wants to know is how did they penalize back then? Were they as strict, or did they have a little bit of leeway, or?
No, if a car come through inspection and like for templates, for instance, and we put the template on, it was a little bit off, matter of fact, it could be a quarter of an inch or better even off. They'd have to go around and fix it and come back through. And there wouldn't be no big deal, as long as they got the car legal to pass inspection.
Did you ever have a crew chief just look at you and just, come on, Tony?
I'm sure. Yeah.
I guess the question is did you ever take that nod and let him go? You're retired, Tony.
No, no. I tell you what, our series directors and our immediate supervisors, and especially our series director and all the way up to the president of NASCAR, they would always tell us, you're not inspecting personnel, you're inspecting the car.
Right,
and if
sure.
it's car 1 through 99, that's what you're looking for. You're not, you're inspecting the car, and if you have a good friend or relatives or whatever, you can't let it, influence you.
Right. So
if you did, you lose all respect to the crew chief.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That was a big thing. You had to.
Sure.
I mean, if one crew chief says something to you like, "Hey, man, this is Martinsville. What does an inch off matter?" Well, it's not where it makes a big difference. Not it's having it right. If you let him go, you lose his respect, and you lose the respect of all the other crew chief as well.
So
he said, "Well, if he does it for me, he'll do it for them."
That's right.
Scott Feldhausen's got a good question here. He says, what's the most obvious thing that you ever caught in inspection that made you shake your head in disbelief that the team actually tried that?
Well, probably in the weight room, or like I mentioned earlier about trying to get stuff through added weight, that wasn't supposed to be in the car. And I mean, we had when the car came up on the scales, we usually had another official maybe on the other side of the car, checking, and which we've seen caught stuff inside the helmet, hanging up, and eventually we probably finally just quit letting them have water bottles in the car. And
I saw a picture somewhere that someone showed the 3-car going through tech, and Dale Sr. was standing behind the official with his foot on the scale.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that was when you had to have a certain clearance on the valance in front. We had this one tool that went around the front. It had had to have a 3.5 inch clearance or something. I forgot now exactly what it was, but you could. Of course, they wanted to get it as low to the ground as they could in front, So if that tool wouldn't go under there, well, you'd catch them pushing down on the back end, which would make the front end come up.
That's right.
One of the things I'm thinking about along with Scott Feldhausen's question here is sometimes I think if there's something so obvious, then they're hiding something else. They want you to feel like you may have found something wrong and may let the obvious be found in the inobvious.
I think that happens sometimes, that they would come to inspection intentionally getting something minor, and then saying, okay, you got that, but we got away with this, you know. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't know of really
Dickie
anything.
Dennis wants to know, why is it that if a car fails inspection twice, it's still permitted to compete?
Well, you know, that's a good question, but they always have to pass inspection before they race. I mean, if it takes 2-3 times, you know, I mean, there's a pretty big penalty now
Yeah.
if they
lose
don't
a
pass
car chief
inspection. I mean,
vote.
you go to the rear and even go as a pass through and have to take a green or
Doesn't the car chief get
injections.
set out a week if they miss or something?
Yeah,
Something like that.
yeah, he does.
Yeah.
At least one race, maybe 3 or so.
Yeah.
Did you ever have it to where the car was so bad off that they ended up having to get the backup car out, like it failed? You know?
Yeah. Let's see. We had I forgot now what race it was, but we had one parked, and then at Sonoma had 2 cars from the same team got kicked out, and they had to get the backup. It was all tacoed up so bad, you know, that they wasn't no way they could fix it. So they,
Who was that, Tony?
There you go, getting into the
Come on,
nitty gritty.
Tony, who was that? That was so long ago.
it was
Sonoma.
a 48 and a 24,
Okay.
if I remember right. Now it was a.
Oh, okay. I thought
There
it
you
was
go.
Rick Ware Racing or something.
And the other car that we parked behind the hauler was a 20 car. And I forgot now what was wrong with it, but
Do you recall what year that was?
no.
Yeah, I remember hearing some about the cars that they had drilled holes in the roll cages and things like that.
Yeah,
where
that
you
was
thinner walls.
8-car Stavola brothers at Richmond, I think in about 94, 95. Yes, they did. They made the
Oh,
car
man.
flex.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Very
And I wonder if the
insane.
driver knew about it. Was that Hut maybe, or
I think
or
it was Jeff Burton.
Jeff Burton? Yes.
I don't think he
The
knew
Ray
about
Bestis car maybe, something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little story to tell about that with Harry Hyde. Harry Hyde was probably one of my biggest
7.
influence in racing. But I'd run over the road, you know, for like 17 years, and had a chance to go work for Consolidated Freight as a local. And I was involved in seniority, so every year I'd get laid off, you know. So I said, well, heck with this. I said, I'm going to go give me a job with the race team. You know? And so I went to Harry Hyde was a crew chief. It's like 91, I think it was. And so I go in, I introduce myself, you know, tell him I'm interested, you know, in the job. And he said, what do you do now? I said, well, I work for Consolidated Freight, but I get laid off every year, and I'm kind of tired of that because I got to go out and find part-time work to get me through the winter.
Yeah.
And so we talked a little bit, and finally he says, okay. He said, we need a driver. He said, and you certainly qualified to drive a truck. He said, but I want you to go home and think about this tonight, and you let me know what you decide tomorrow. He said, why in the hell would you want to leave a job like you've got to work for a race team? And, you know, I got home and I got thinking, you know, I said, you know, I'm going to throw away a lot to them. So that's probably the best advice I ever got.
You know, it's interesting you say that about the Harry Hyde and all that and Consolidated Freightways, because my uncle worked at Consolidated Freightways and he got laid off, and he was a limo driver for the movie Days of Thunder. He was Tom Cruise's limo driver. His name was Ronnie Sneed. I don't know if you maybe knew him.
No.
But that would have been a long time ago. But Tom Cruise ended up giving him a nice leather jacket. I guess it had Days of Thunder on it. But yeah, very cool. So Scott says Felton House. Oh, he said something about the fuel lines in the roll cage. Yeah, that I remember hearing that one too. He could take the fuel cell out, and then he drove the car home. I forgot.
That Smoky unit.
Yeah, it was one of his cars. I believe it was. Yes.
But yeah, I've heard stories of that, and you know, before Smokey passed away, he'd come and hang out in the garage some, and I had a privilege to talk to him. I mean, not a real lengthy conversation, just,
Right.
you know, and speak casually with him. But I heard the story about when he they took his fuel cell at Daytona, I believe, and after they take it, he drove it back to the shop there at Daytona.
Yeah.
So now he said, I could have drove it to Jacksonville.
Yes.
Lines, yep. I remember back in the 90s, if you had a failed part at Daytona, they would put it on display for everybody to see. They'd have a table outside of the NASCAR hauler, and they'd have that illegal part on display for all the crew chiefs would come by. And by the end of the week, there was about 20 parts on that table.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah, anytime you confiscated a part there, you had to label it, what it was, and then put it, either take it in the trailer or on the lot.
Now nobody sees it.
There's some. Have you been down to the NASCAR Hall of Fame?
I have, right after it opened. Yeah,
I like going through and looking at all the illegal parts and stuff. It's very interesting.
But I only had to, me personally, took some windshield clips. I was doing the safety, and the windshield, they got at that time had like 9 around there, and they had big old thick windshield clips on there. So I took those, and I think it was like a $500 fine for that.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, I'll say this one thing. We used to put, everybody was doing it, I think, putting sterno in the air cleaner and a plate track and the restrictor plate races. Yeah, that was a big trick.
Yeah. But qualifying there, I don't know what brought this on or anything, but before qualifying, we had to start putting tape over the cowl there, to keep, so to make sure they wouldn't spray any kind of like ether or whatever in there, to give them a little bit of extra.
Right, yeah.
So all that officiating stuff sounds a little boring. Was there anything that was really like one of the coolest things you did in all your officiating career, Tony?
Well, we had some fun. I mean, we had, we interacted with the team some, like we had our bowling tournaments at Martinsville every year. But one of the coolest things, I guess, that I did, Jason was a car chief on the 20 car, and he was always giving us a hard time. And even when Scott Deal, and he was not the car chief, I said crew chief, but he come through on the scales, and they were like 3 pounds light on the right side. So I tried to work with him, and move the car over, use forward on the right side. And finally, I said, well, you can't get it right. I said, go put some weight in and bring it back. So I had one guy on the right side that was helping me see, everything was okay. And had this big old roll of tape. So I told Rodney on the other side, I said, stick this behind the camera box there. He said, okay. So they come back in and roll on scale. So Rodney Wiley is on the right side, and he said, Tony, he said, you got to see this, come here. So I'm on the driver's side. So what, Rodney? He said, well, you got to see this. He said, look behind that camera box. I pulled out this big old roll of tape, and Jason, his eyes got about that big. I swear, we didn't do that. I didn't know that was there, I said, all I know is it was about 3 pounds light. It's about 3 pounds. Take it out there and park it, and Mr. Darby will be out there to see you. Oh, Lord,
my gosh.
And he was about to have, he was going crazy. And finally we started laughing. He called me a bad name, and he even talked about that, and years after that, he'd say, "You took 5 years off my life that day." But we had some fun doing stuff like that. And
yeah, I'm sure there was always a lot of little lead pellets down on the apron of the racetracks, a lot of times, because they would have those in the frame rails. And then they had a way to let them out during the race.
Yeah, that's a big note. I mean, that's a big deal there. If you had any lead or tungsten in the wrong place and it comes out, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
right there.
for sure. Yeah, Scott. Let's see. Scott Feltenhausen says, I heard stories that there was a team in the mid '80s or early '90s that used exhaust tubing for parts of the roll cage. Yeah, how about that? And Andy Petrie told a great story about cheating up one of Harry Gant's cars at Daytona. something about using a factory Olds trunk motor to control the angle of the spoiler. How about that? So I guess you could use the Oldsmobile trunk motor to change the angle of the spoiler.
Yeah. See,
All kinds of stuff.
You hear stories like that back in the day, back in the 80s, 70s, 80s and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's no way they could get away with
No,
stuff
not
like
this
that
time.
anymore.
No.
I mean, there's just
What
too
it-
much.
Rachel wants to know what was the most difficult aspect of being an official. Man, it's not all fun and games.
Well, the most, I guess, just pit road was difficult because we had a car on pit road every Sunday, and the biggest thing was getting things right. I mean, you didn't want to make a call that was, especially if you got it wrong, and there was, it'd have an influence on the outcome of the race. And,
Right, yeah.
And I think all of our officials took great pride in trying to get things right. And
Now it's all done with
cameras,
cameras and angles.
yeah, cameras. And one thing about pit road officiating, the most controversial rule we ever had, I think, on pit road was that uncontrolled tire. And we had more Monday morning meetings about how to call that. I mean, so what that rule was first put in place for was you had some guys, the right front tire changer, could take that tire off and he could put like what you call left-handed English, I guess, and spin that thing right around the front of the car.
Yeah.
And some of them were really good at it, and some of them sucked. I mean, they'd roll that tire and try to do that, and it may end up who knows where,
Messing
know.
up another pit stall.
And that was really a dangerous because another car hit that thing, But that was the rule was, you had to. They finally said, you got to control the tire halfway back to the wall, and some officials just never could get it right. I mean, it would, and it was so much controversy on the way to call that finally they did something else, and
Like you have to carry the tire back maybe or something like that.
so now I think they just done away with it and they just roll it back and
Yeah.
have some guys catch it.
I know my last year as a jack man, I would pull the right rear off and then take it to the back of the car and roll it to the pit wall, and then there's somebody back there to grab it. Yep. And what's up, Paul Rodriguez? He's down in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And Jake McVie. So he says, Jake says how about soaking the tires. You ever seen anybody do that?
No, and
I haven't either.
I think God would absolutely be scared to death to even try to do that
Short
because
tracks,
there's things you don't mess with. That's
Right.
tires,
Smell it.
fuel, and
Smell it when they run
Yeah.
the short tracks.
That would be a tough one for sure. Now, one I used to see a lot, or I've always thought, was the tires that were in the trailers, and who got the better tires, or the not ones that maybe hadn't been sitting in the trailer as long, those kinds of things. I still always think that happened.
Sure.
Pretty good bit.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know anything about that, but it's
So
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, is he's not even watching that. He said he was eating whenever but that's fine. We can ask. You
what
can
do you
ask
mean?
it.
Beer man is eating and he can't watch.
I know,
your
right?
show?
Yeah, so I don't know. So yeah, go for it.
Well, that's in honor of the beer man, Scott Trevison. We want to know what your favorite Sterling Marlin story is. You can tell it.
Favorite Sterling Marlin story, and that we start that off with the cowbell. That's a good idea, Phil. I like that.
you sure it's okay?
Sure. Why not?
But I really don't know what these were, but I had a pretty good idea. But anyway, we were on the pit road before the race, and it started on 9, and I think Tom Glover and some other guys before the race there. Sterling's getting his car, and he was fun around, and all of a sudden this bottle falls out, and the lid comes off. little pills go everywhere. And so we're down there trying. First said, "Damn it, get them things that cost $1 a piece."
Little blue pills all over the ground.
Oh yes.
Oh, he's a regular Boy Scout. Be prepared.
Sterling was a great guy. I'm telling you, we got to be good friends with his hauler driver, little pup, and
Yeah.
yeah.
You know how the hauler drivers always had the products, you know, like the Skull driver had the Skull, and then we had the beer with the Coors Light, you know, Jerry Swites, and it was always like, hey, I mean, it was like they would trade it. Like he chewed tobacco a lot, Jerry Swites, or dipped, so he would always trade the beer for his dip, but I didn't do that stuff. So it's like, man,
I could see that.
you know. So did you ever have any of that? As a truck driver, I mean, did you have? Did you have your? Did you do any of that?
Yeah, well, actually, I worked with Lake Speed in 1993. And
Spam, or that was
no,
later?
the Purex. He had the Purex car, number
okay.
83.
Okay.
And Spam.
I was thinking, yeah, that would be a good
But
sponsor.
Fatback McSwain, Michael McSwain, they need a truck driver. He's only run like 10 races that year, and somewhere along the line, the truck driver they had couldn't do any more. So called me to see if I could, run the hauler for a few races. And our first race was an inaugural race at New Hampshire in 1993. And so we had the Purex sponsorship, and so Henry Benfield came over to me, and he's
Piccolo player.
Yeah, Piccolo player. He said, "You got any of that washing powders?" I said, "Yeah, some Purex." And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I'll get you some." He said, "All right, come on over to the truck." He said, "I'll get you some beer." And so I gave him the washing powders, and that evening on the way home there, or the way to the hotel, some of the guys said, "Hey, we seen you talking to Henry. Did you get us some beer?" I said, "Well, no." I said, Lake's pretty religious. I didn't know how he'd feel about, He said, "Oh, Lake be cool with us." Said, "We go out to eat, and Lake has a non-alcoholic beverage." He said, "We do have a beer." And the rest of those guys said, "You mean you didn't get no beer?" And so they gave me a hard time, man. So next day I go to Henry. I said, "Henry, you still got some beer?" He said, "Yeah, I'll get you a beer." But,
Lake Speed talked to Risa Speed recently, and they're planning to come on the show and spend some time with David in December. So it'll be nice to have them on.
Yeah, that'd be very cool.
Lake Speed is really a nice guy. I mean, he lives what he preaches. I mean,
Yes,
he's really a good. The first race I went with him was Dover, and so I take the truck in, we park it in the shopping center lot, and his car pulls up, and I had the guys in there, and this lady driving the car, So I get in the car, she stuck around and said, "Hey," he said, "I'm Risa Speed. We're going to take you guys out to dinner tonight." And I said, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, great people.
Yeah, they are. They're really, really
So
great
who would you
people.
say was your favorite driver that you ever worked with, and maybe even before you got into NASCAR, who was your favorite driver growing up or when you were younger?
Well, I never was a big driver fan, but I kind of looked at their ability, and I always had a lot of respect for David Pearson. I thought he was probably the greatest driver ever.
Yeah.
And Harry Gant, I liked Harry a lot. And matter of fact, I think Harry's the only autograph that I ever got from any driver, and he took the hat off my head and signed it because I had on a Harry Gant hat, and I didn't even ask for it. But Harry was a pretty cool guy, and in the modern day area, well, I think the world is Tony Stewart. I mean, he's been more interactive with the guys, than more than any of them. And Tony's dad and I, we become pretty good friends, and that was kind of.
You have any tales you can tell of the long haul on the road with the drivers? Anything that, during heavy winds and houses go rolling across the road, or what's the most bizarre thing in your travels?
Well, everything's really going pretty smooth, I guess. I've been in some ice storms and pretty much hurricanes, I guess, tornadoes and stuff. But I had a pretty bad accident, one in Cincinnati, Ohio. I laid one over coming through the tunnel there at Riverfront Stadium.
One of the haulers?
Yeah, well, that's when I worked for. Then I wasn't a NASCAR hauler. It was when I worked for.
So I always like to ask if there's a, Dale Earnhardt story. Dale Senior. You got a Dale Senior story?
Well, actually, there is that first race at Fontana that I was talking about earlier. They put the first practice after initial inspection. Well, they put me on directing traffic, or they call it now whistle duty or whatever. But they put me over there right directly behind Dale Earnhardt's hauler. And so when it come to practice, while he came out from hollering, all the fans were around, wanting autographs. So when he came to me, I stand right at the back of his car. When he got to me, I just stepped between him and the fans and stopped him, said, man's got to go to work, man. You can't, go in. So he turned around, kind of patted me on the butt and shook me by the nape of the neck, and turned around and walked in. Well, after the practice was over, my boss was a transportation supervisor. He came up and he said, "What do you do?" I said, "What do you mean what I do?" He said, "You work anymore?" I said, "No." And he said, "Would you be interested in doing this full time?" And I said, "Well, I hadn't thought anything about it." I said, "Why?" Yeah. He said, "Well, our boss man likes you." And I said, "Who's our boss?" And or who's your boss? I don't have a boss. He said, "It's Gary Nelson." And apparently Gary was standing at the back of the trailer. You can see out there.
Saw what had happened.
And he'd seen what happened with Dale. And I think that's really what got me a job there as a full-time. And they went on that rest of that year. We kind of worked. They'd call me, about every week, to do something, drive a coach or take a hauler or go pick up a car or something. That
was a good old crew way back then.
Oh yeah, it was.
A tight
It was great.
bunch of guys.
Mm-hmm. And so then that winter, I got a package from Daytona, offered me a full-time job. And I said, "Well, I'll try this for a year." And so 20 years later, you're still involved in it. But like I said, this is my last deal.
What was the team that you had the most fun with? Or let's say, what was your most funnest year, if that's a word, funnest?
Yes. Well, it'd be hard to say. I mean, I really enjoyed the whole deal. I was working for NASCAR. I mean, they were a great company to work for, and they treated you right, and as long as you did your job, you was pretty big. I only got in trouble with them a couple of times, and I guess we getting called to the big red trailer or white trailer or what it was at the time. But during practice, my job was to send cars off for practice. You had to wouldn't let but so many on the track at a time, and you had to monitor that, and send them off. Well, 17 spun out at Martinsville between turn 1 and 2. And the time I got the car stopped, they stayed on the track and come around, and I was down there at the beginning of the back stretch out of turn number 2. And two of the crew guys run up on the wall, you know, and was wanting to go to the car. Well, I was trying to say, no, you can't. I mean, it was like 75 yards away, 100 yards. And Jeff Burton was the first car that I had stopped there. And those guys, they hit the track, was right out on the track. Well, that's a, you know, big no-no.
Right.
So the tower, they said, you know, get those guys hard card, and, you know, so I said, boy, I'm a big doo-doo now, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So as soon as practice is over, I went in the trailer, and Harvey and Hilton, and I was in there, and said, what happened? I said, well, I take full responsibility. My fault. I should have, you know, been more adamant about keeping the guys off the track. I said, but it all happened so quick. I said, it's too far to yell at them. And I said, which I should have. I said, but I just screwed up. And Jeff Burton was standing there, and he said, well, he said, I was right there. He said, Tony was trying to get the guys, said it's just like a communication and hand signals. And he said, okay, and that was pretty much the end of that.
That was nice.
Yeah, it was, isn't it?
Yeah.
And another time I tried to hold a car. Eddie Sadler was a driver for pitting out of the box, and he wasn't out of the box because it was a night race. And the start-finish line, you know, goes all the way into the pit boxes, all the way to the wall. And there's about that, probably 3 foot between the pit box and that start-finish line. And I was out of position, so he came in. He went over the start-finish line through the pit box. Well, I was trying to back him up. They didn't pay no attention. I just kept on working. So
Yeah.
I stepped in front of the car, going to hold him on lap.
Yeah.
All them guys were raising Cain, you know. And,
Sure.
so I finally realized what I'd done. So I jumped back, and his fortune's under caution. So
That's a tough job. A
yeah,
lot of pressure.
It just, you know, one mistake, and I kind of got chewed out for that.
Sure. But you're not the only one.
No, but
I've heard of a lot of them.
But I apologized to the crew chief, and he said, "Hey," he said, "we only lost 4 or 5 spots." He said, "It wasn't no big deal." So we're good.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Just like the pit crew guys. I mean, you miss a lug nut, or you leave 1 or 2 off, or the jackman drops it too soon, too late. It's all, you know, we all make mistakes, and that happens. So Scott says he sent me a tweet, so I'll check that out afterwards. And then Scott Trevison finally joined us. He says, "Great stories tonight." And we've already asked your question, Scott. We had a cowbell and everything. So
Yeah, you're going to have to go back, Scott, and look at. You're going to have to like it twice and listen.
That's right. You know, I said like it, or if you don't like it, hit the thumbs down twice.
Oh no!
Because it takes it off after you hit it again.
Oh, does it? Yeah.
It does.
Oh, no.
Dickie Dennis says, officially speaking, should it be called the chase or playoffs?
well, I guess both of them is appropriate. I mean, Chase, but I like the playoffs. Don't particularly like the format, but
Tony, why don't you tell them about how you and I met 20 years ago last month? And
Oh,
we
gosh,
experienced one of the coolest things that I've ever done in racing.
yeah, that was a cool deal there. It's probably one of the coolest things I've did too.
Yeah.
But we were at Talladega, and on the backstretch they had this spotter stand that kind of hung out over the track there. Actually, didn't feel.
Halfway down the backstretch, it's
Yeah.
pushed right up against the fence, and
Yeah.
it hangs out just a little over the fence. And you're only about 10 feet. It's like standing on a basketball rim, and the cars go underneath you doing about 210.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was awesome.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
it's
man.
You talk about a
incredible.
rush now. You
Yeah,
get-
Tony and I were up in that. When
Yeah.
Earnhardt won his last race,
yeah, he came from like
17th or
17th place,
Yeah,
and
we were there in that
yeah.
backstretch watching him weave in and out of that traffic.
and
Wow.
yeah, Phil, he came up to me. He found out I was going to be back there, and he says, "Hey, can I be okay if I go in?" I said, "Sure." And so he got a pretty cool picture of me.
The one that you did the promo.
well,
where the
yeah,
cars were
and,
whizzing by.
That's right. Yeah.
Actually, I didn't just check with you. I checked with David Hoots in the tower too. So.
Did you?
Oh yeah. Anytime I need to do something like that.
Yeah.
He was always really good as long as you just checked with them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You had to.
But that was amazing. I mean, those cars would go under you, and that wind would you'd have to hang out of the bar practically.
Yeah. The first time I came by, it almost blew my headset off. Cause when he come by, why he said I wasn't too bad. And then all of a sudden, the rush would hit you.
Yeah.
The cars were the whole field would go by, and then the wind would come through off the cars.
Was that the video you took, Phil? I mean, or is that somewhere else?
No, that was the one I put on Facebook the other day was at Homestead. I need to send that to you, and you need to put that
That's
up.
right. That'll be cool.
Yes, it would.
See how it does. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Who was your let's say your you respected the most, you looked up to, and you favored the most, like a NASCAR official wise, or Winston Cup employee, whatever. They're NASCAR employee, but in their Winston Cup series.
Well, over series drag, I had a lot of respect for Gary Nelson and also John Darby. I had a lot of respect for John Darby. He was fair. He was strict, and if you did your job, he was good with it. But Gary, back then we'd always go to Daytona and test during the winter for 2 weeks. And the first week we were there, the weekend, we would fly home on the company plane. And on that weekend, I ended up sitting all the way in the back of the plane with Gary Nelson. He was sitting beside him. That was when the XM radios first came out.
Yeah.
And Gary had bought one, and he was sitting there reading directions and telling me all about it, And he said, "Can you see that right engine over there on the way?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Keep an eye on that thing. We've been having some problems with it." Said, if you see any smoke or fire or anything, said, let the pilots know.
Sure.
And I said,
Get me off this
okay. From Daytona to Concord, I never took my eye off of that. So
I bet.
when we started to land, Gary looked at me and laughed, and he said, "I guess our engine made it okay, did it?"
Yeah.
I said, "Well, you got me."
What's that? Rachel's asking.
Where were there tracks that were more difficult to officiate than others?
Yeah. I'd say I have to put Dover and Bristol on pit road more than anything, because Bristol was just so hard to hear and hard to communicate with the crew chief, and Dover, the pit road was so narrow that you had to be really, really careful, and not. First of all, you didn't want to get in the competitors' way from them doing their job, and then you had to do your job too.
Right, without getting
And,
hit.
So you had to be really extra careful there.
That's a good point.
But my favorite places to officiate on pit and road was the road courses like Sonoma and Watkins Glen. They were short races, and usually they were off sequence. All the cars were on their pit stops, and you didn't, it was, you had more room.
Yeah.
You didn't have to worry about getting
Those
run
are
over.
definitely easier places to pit, because it's like you would pit the car, and then about it would get quiet a lot of times, and then minute and a half later you're like, oh, there they come again.
So you were around in the days. I want to ask you if you remember Jimmy Cox?
Oh yeah.
Look at the smile. Give me a good Jimmy Cox story. He was a personality, boy. Jimmy was the paddle guy at the end of pit road, the stop and go guy.
Well, this went back to in 1993 when I was working with Lake there, when I went in to park the hauler. We didn't have no points. They parked the trucks, by the point system.
Right.
So we were, we didn't have no points, so we were basically the last truck to get in there. And it was tight. I mean, and Jimmy Cox was the one that parked the trucks. And he was trying to get me, and and he was backing me up. You know, he had to have everything just right. And so I finally get out of the truck and I said, look, not trying to be smart or anything, but exactly where do you want this truck? And he said, I want you right here, you know, and said, you're not going to.
I can see Jimmy.
I said, okay. I said, I'm sorry. I said, you know, I'm pretty new at this. Just bear with me.
He's a great guy, though.
Yeah.
He would get fired up. I could see him.
But I think Jimmy had already quit when I actually started working, but I got to know him because when we'd race at Charlotte, he'd come out and have dinner with us and stuff.
Yeah, I was supposed to stop over his house one day after he retired. He was going to give me one of his paddles, and I never did. I really wish I would have.
So if you, this is a big one, right? So if you own NASCAR, what changes would you make?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, you can answer that today.
Well, yeah. Like I said, I'm no spokesman for NASCAR whatsoever. This is strictly my opinion. But there's some things that I don't like, in my personal opinion about it. I don't like the free pass. I don't like the waving around. And what I would like to see, I mean, I would like to see all quickie yellows and everybody pit at the same time, and you go back out on the track or watch you coming. I mean, if you're a lap down, that's you got the option of staying on the track and whatever, you know. But,
Right.
I'm sure that, you know, something like that never happened. But that's, and, you know, you have a lot of friends that are fans, and they say, well, it's not like it used to be. You know, they used to race back to the caution, you know, to get their lap back. And that's just too dangerous. You can't do that. And I say, well, you know, you say it's not like it used to be, but the racing today is, my opinion, better than it's ever been forever.
It really is. You got so many contenders. Anybody could win any week.
Well, you have. But and another thing, I don't like this charter deal, you know. But you know, it seemed like it's so unfair to somebody that's trying to get into racing.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. Paul says, do you think stage racing at road courses takes the strategy away from the crew chiefs?
It's a good question.
Well, it goes both ways. It helps strategy, and it hurts strategy, I guess. And that's another thing I don't personally like either, that stage racing. And but the strategy could work in a crew chief's favor, or it could work against them. It's according to where they're at on the track or what position they're in, or you know, if they're
Definitely mixes it up.
if they're if you know, some reason or other they've got a lap down, you know, and they in position to get the free pass or either the waving round after stage racing, which normally wouldn't be a caution.
Yeah.
And under normal circumstances.
Okay. All right. Well, Tony, do you have any parting words for our friends here? If they have, well, I'll say one thing. If y'all want to ask Tony any more questions, you can ask it on the video after it's over, and I'll make sure that he gets it. Me and Phil make sure that he gets the question, and he'll answer it to you. And if you got any final questions, go ahead and throw them out here, because we're going to let Tony get out of here.
Well, one thing is we talked about it earlier before the show, that what's the craziest thing I've ever seen? I guess the craziest thing is when the jet dryer got run over it, and and then another thing when the camera cable broke at Charlotte, and that was a mess, and that was one of the most weirdest things that we ever seen, because we had cars stringing, you know, part of the cable hooked on to some of the cars, you know, and they were stretching that thing down pit road, and you know, you're afraid that thing's going to break. And all kind of stuff could have happened, but it all turned out pretty good.
Did you have anything strange happen at Talladega that you can think of? I mean, I know was it the ARCA president was killed that one year, probably 99, maybe something like that, on the outside the track. You know, it's like a runway out there, and he got run over by somebody.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, outside of turn 4 there, because after that,
Yeah.
They posted police there. It's like a 5 or 6 way intersection. There's no
Right.
stop signs or nothing like that.
Yeah, an old
It's
runway.
an old runway tarmac.
And then we blew out the windows in the airplane. That's probably the last time Race Day Express landed at that little airport. It blew the windows out in the terminal. Just weird things like that.
Yeah,
You know.
one funny little story about Talladega there that had a big room there right outside the scale room there that you know, the fish, we'd go in, take breaks and stuff, and during the ARCA race there, well, we'd all get in this one little room, and we'd get a pool up for the first, throw $1 in the pot for what lap the first caution would come out in the ARCA race, and so right next to that room there's a little interview room, and the drivers would go in there for an interview and stuff, and Clint Boyer came in the room because and he said, "What y'all doing in here? You know, you need to be out here respecting these cheating people on these cars." You know, just how Clint. We said, "Well, we got a pool up for the ARCA race when the first caution came. Oh, let me in on that." Yeah. I said, "What you got left?" It's lap 26. Ernie told his PR guy, "Give me $1." So yeah, he gave him $1. He's okay. I'm in. So he goes and has his interview, comes back in. "Who won?" "You did, lap 26. Man, he starts high-fiving everybody, you know. I said, "Hey, boy, you won $25. I said, "Not the Daytona 500. Yeah. "Oh, I'd rather win $25 from you guys." That's pretty funny, though.
Yeah, that's good. Oh my gosh! All right, well, great stories there. Everybody's telling us. Thanks for the stories, and thank you all so much for tuning in. And don't forget to hit that subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that thumbs up. And let's see, Racing Roots with Hamm on the Facebook page. Check that out, because we always post the links to whenever we're going to go live. And tune in to WAME in the morning. I'll be on with the Billy Buck Morning Show. And you can tune in on WAME Radio right here on YouTube. And let's see, I'm not sure about next week's guest yet, but I do have some possibilities. I don't know if he is or not. Bobby Kennedy may come in. He's supposed to let me know, and I have a couple more that should be.
We got the McLaughlins slated for December 2nd. It's Mike McLaughlin and Max McLaughlin.
Yeah, that'll be very cool. And I don't know if I should mention my other one, maybe Donnie Allison, possibly at the end of the month. So we'll see how that goes. And but it's going to be good. We're going to get some more people in here, and we're going to learn their racing roots, because that's what it's all about. We love the history of racing in general. I mean, you know, NASCAR in general too, because that's kind of like the racing that I worked in for so many years and built the love for the sport, and Phil and Tony. But you know, I'll take any kind of racing, because I think we all have this one thing in common. We all love that. We all love the smell of the burning fuel, the burning rubber, and whatever else. The fun stories, the fun times, and the people.
I'd never get tired of hearing those things fire up, you know, of a morning there when they'd be sitting there timing and all that stuff. I'm thinking, bam, 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 you know.
That's right, yes. And, yeah, for sure, man. And also, DHammiam.com. That's where you can find me on all the social media. And I'll put this show on DHammiam.com. And then eventually I'll turn it into a podcast, and you can find it there as well. So when you're driving down the road, you can be listening instead of just on YouTube. So, and if you'd like to sponsor this show, send me a message.
Yeah, like Jersey Cape Yachts.
That's right, man. I put the pictures from this on there, and I tagged them in all of them on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff.
There you go, yeah.
All right, well, y'all, thanks so much, and good night to you. And what is that?
And a happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Oh, that's right, man. Happy Thanksgiving. I'm actually off from the radio after tomorrow morning. I'll be off the rest of the week. So it's going to be something else. So, but everybody have a great rest of the week and a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next Monday.